Mendus released Q2 report today, and we have an honor to have the CEO Erik Manting with us today for an interview. Welcome, Erik.
Hey, Antti, good to see you.
Would you start first by going through the main developments and news for you in Q2?
Right, so first of all, we secured some additional cash runway, so we now have a strong cash position of 130 million Swedish krona, and we also got full support from our largest shareholders. So that was a good start of the second quarter. On the operational side, we have focused mostly on the one hand, generating more data from the ongoing trial, that's the ADVANCE II trial. Most important progress has been that we did in-depth immunomonitoring, which means we did immunological studies to determine what is happening in the immune system of patients treated with Ilixadencel. And what was very clear is that the immune system responds very well to the therapy. So we see an overall improvement of the immune status of patients. And also what was clear is that the broader immune response, which involves both T cells and B cells, correlates very well with the clinical outcome. So the patients that had good T cell responses and good levels of B cells were all in the long-term survival curve. So for us, that's a very important part of the trial because it now delivers proof of concept of what we believe the biggest potential of Ilixadencel is, which is to have an active immunotherapy approach, an approach that leads to the immune system of the patient actually building up protection against residual disease, leading to durable responses in the clinic, combined with a very good safety profile. So for us, that was an important additional step in the ADVANCE II trial, and also a very important validation of our approach in AML. Then we had an update on the ovarian cancer trial, the ALLA trial, which we do together with the University Medical Center in Groningen. The trial has been fully recruited, so 17 patients. Out of the 17 patients treated, 10 patients were still without tumor progression at week 22. So now we're following up those patients to see if we can confirm a potential longer-term clinical benefit in that indication. But what's also already clear is that we are able to induce good immune responses against a broad range of antigens that have been associated with ovarian cancer in those patients, and also that the safety profile of the product is very good in that indication. So the ALLA trial is on track. We hope to provide a full update of the immunological analyses of all patients, for all 17 patients, in Q4. That's also the primary endpoint of the trial. And then, of course, in the longer term follow-up to see if it translates into clinical benefit for these patients. And then as a last important piece of progress, we entered into a collaboration with Institut Bergonié, which is a leading French cancer center, and they're running a trial, Regomune, which is a large trial, actually involving 7 of the leading French cancer centers. And that trial is testing a combination of regorafenib, which is a drug developed by Bayer, and avelumab, which is a drug developed by Merck. And that combined is a good base level treatment for adding on immunotherapies. And we were looking for a trial in soft tissue sarcomas, which is a group of tumors that you can reach with intratumoral priming, which is the basis for Ilixadencel, but also which is a group of tumors that is very poorly responding to current available therapies, including immunotherapy. So what we will test in this trial is the hypothesis that with adding Ilixadencel, we can improve the effectiveness of the immune system towards established tumors that are normally not responding very well to immunotherapy. So it's a very exciting trial with a good group of centers, and we're very happy we were able to announce in July that we have closed this collaboration, and we're now in the preparation of the trial. And then as a last part, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. So as you know, we are preparing our lead program, Ilixadencel, for late-stage development in AML. That means we are developing a trial protocol, we're seeking regulatory feedback, we're also in a collaboration with NorthX, a manufacturer, to set up large-scale GMP manufacturing. And as we speak, we are starting up the CADENCE trial, or AMLM22 CADENCE, as it's officially called, in a collaboration with ALLG. We received the green light from the ethics committee to start a trial in March. So it means as a next step, you have to train the hospitals, you have to get your clinical trial material to Australia, and that's what we have been engaged in the second quarter of the year. And now we can also announce that the first centers will be open from September.
You already mentioned the CADENCE trial, which is really important for you going forward. Could you zoom out a little bit and recap for us what the CADENCE trial is about in the big picture?
Yes, so when we started the ADVANCE 2 trial, so the current ongoing trial, there was no approved treatment for AML maintenance. And it is a monotherapy trial. Now, in the meantime, there is a drug approved. It's called oral azacitidine, and it's an oral formulation of an older chemotherapy, but it's now approved for AML maintenance therapy. And that drug is now the only approved drug in AML maintenance. The Australian group we work with, ALLG, they have been very actively contributing to the development of oral azacitidine. So they were, for us, a very important group to be in touch with, and they were very enthusiastic about working with vididencel. So the basis of the collaboration is to combine oral azacitidine with vididencel. There's good evidence, both out of publications from others, but also our own work, which we did preclinical work and some initial observations from the phase 1 trial, that there should be a synergistic effect, and also it should also be a safe combination to test vididencel in combination with azacitidine, but you have to do the trial. And this is a very large trial. It's up to 140 patients. The first phase is a two-stage trial. So the first stage of the trial is treating up to 40 patients. And that's mainly focused on establishing safety. That part is expected to be ready roughly in the beginning of 26. And assuming there is a good safety profile confirmed, it will, in a seamless design, move on to include another 100 patients. So it's a very sizable trial that as a first step establishes the safety of the combination, and in the second step, in a very meaningful way and with a large number of patients, will establish whether or not we can improve the efficacy in combination with oral azacitidine of AML maintenance treatment. So the trial is now starting up. First centers open in September. With safety data, it's basically an ongoing process. So almost by definition, you always know if there is safety issues, yes or no, right? So if something goes wrong, you immediately have to step in and report and what have you. So from day one, we will start collecting safety data. Right? What we have also discussed with the FDA, and that is also what we discussed earlier in the year, we have positive FDA feedback on our plans to move forward, but also that the safety data from the CADENCE trial can be used for our global registration dossier for vididencel. So predominantly, initially, it is actually testing in the most relevant setting, so the current maintenance setting, the combination of vididencel and azacitidine, first of all, establishing that it's a safe combination, but then it's also helping the start of the preparations for a registration trial, and it will hopefully translate in a very meaningful trial up to 140 patients. So that's the relevance of the CADENCE trial.
And as you said, you've just only started recently, but what are the main milestones in that trial that you can share with us now?
Well, it's basically what I just summarized on. So initially, it's really testing the combination one-on-one in the proper setting, making sure it's safe. And there's different elements built into the trial that will also allow us to initially establish some signs of efficacy. There's regular MRD meetings, which you also know, MRD measurements, which you also know from our ongoing trial. So we follow the levels of residual disease in patients, and we can see if there is an influence of the vididencel treatment. In the ongoing trial, the ADVANCE 2 trial, we saw that in some patients, MRD was lower than in other patients. MRD was going away completely. So it was a MRD conversion, as you call it. But there were also patients that still had some MRD, but were relatively stable. In hindsight, we now know that it was mostly because they also built up good immune responses that kept the residual disease in control. So that's the kind of data we will also collect from the CADENCE trial. So it's a combination of initial signs of efficacy, but mostly a safety signal that we want to pick up. Right? And the formal part of that is expected in the first half of 26. And assuming again that there are no safety issues, it will immediately expand the trial with another 100 patients. But from day one, the trial will start generating safety data, which we can use for the registration dossier for vididencel.
Great. You already mentioned your immune activation analysis in AML. Or in AML patients. So can you summarize a little bit again, what did you learn from this analysis compared to what you knew before, and how does that knowledge and understanding help you going forward?
Yeah, so there's a technical side to it. So there's certain assays that you can do relatively quickly. In our case, that's ELI-spots. It's a way to measure whether you have T cells against specific antigens. So those data we had also collected relatively quickly, and we reported them end of last year. There was already some encouraging signs of this immunotherapy effect, because the amount of T cell responses we could pick up also correlated with MRD responses and with survival. Now we looked in a lot more in-depth way, and we have built up what's called flow cytometry expertise, and that allows you to really monitor which parts of the immune system are responding and are to the vididencel treatment and are contributing to a potential relevant immune response. And those data were very striking. So what we saw was there are differences at baseline, so before treatment, between different patients. And the patients that have a good status, immune status at the beginning, also have a better chance of building up immunity after the treatment. But also we saw that the treatment resulted in an overall improvement of the immune status. So that was the data we presented at CIMT. What we presented at EHA was in more detail how that immune response evolves and also how it relates to survival benefit. And what we saw was that if you have multiple T cell responses over time, patients have above median level of B cells, they're all in the long-term survival curve. So the positive element is that the correlation between the immune responses and the long-term clinical benefit. So with patients sometimes being disease-free for years, we're now at the current relapse-free survival median of 2.5 years. And we will update how the trial is evolving later in the year, but the picture is already very clear. So you have patients that basically are losing control over the residual cells and relapse, and in the case of AML also die very quickly afterwards, mostly in the first year. The remarkable part is that the majority of patients which were alive at the end of the trial remain alive. And that is very important. That is what makes an active immunotherapy, which leads to long-term immune control over the disease, so valuable. And that is what we are now starting to see.
As you mentioned, you're preparing for a new trial with Ilixadencel for soft tissue sarcomas. So can you explain what's the rationale for going for soft tissue sarcomas and why combining Ilixadencel with 2 other cancer drugs?
Yeah, so the cancer immunotherapy field has done a massive exercise in trying to improve the efficacy of checkpoint inhibitors. Checkpoint inhibitors are molecules that basically take the brakes of the immune system. So you have to be a bit careful not to take too many brakes off, because then you end up with autoimmunity, but generally speaking, they're quite safe. But what we've learned is that only the patients that have pre-existing immunity, so that we're able to build up early on in the disease some immune responses against their tumor cells, are responding to those checkpoint inhibitors. That's only 10 to 20%. And there was a massive effort to see if we could raise the bar by combining it with all kinds of other immunotherapies. And the simple answer is it has failed, unfortunately. So we need to rethink the way how we approach immunotherapy, but also how we can position specifically Ilixadencel. And we took a radical choice, which is to basically stop what we were doing in renal cell carcinoma in a combination trial we had ongoing for patients that were already on treatment with checkpoint inhibitors. And we are now focusing on tumors that are not responding currently to checkpoint inhibitors. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't combine with checkpoint inhibitors. It's a different mindset. It's not looking for those tumors that respond and then hope you will have more patients respond. It's tumors that do not respond and see if the Ilixadencel can make a difference. And that is what we will now test. So these soft tissue sarcomas are a perfect example of tumors that are poorly responding. So they're typically treated with surgery and sometimes radiotherapy, but they're very poorly responding to other therapies and they have a high recurrence rate. So the big problem is, how do you get the immune system to work well and attack these tumors? And then you can combine it obviously with other molecules that inhibit the tumor growth, like tyrosine kinase inhibitors. And you can try to improve the efficacy of the immune system with checkpoint inhibitors like avelumab in this case. But the Ilixadencel has to make the difference. And that is what we can now establish in the RegImmune trial, which we will do together with Berger. So we want to see that the Ilixadencel makes a difference between tumors that are without immune cells, where the immune cells have difficulties entering the tumor and having a therapeutic effect. And the tumors treated with Ilixadencel, where we will hopefully see that the immune cells are able to reach the tumor and hopefully also will have a synergistic effect with the avelumab and the regorafenib as part of the trial.
And in terms of timelines, when could we expect the first readout of data from this trial?
Yeah, so we're setting the trial up now. Like with ALLG, we have to train the centers. We have to make sure that all the local approvals for the hospitals opening up are there. So it does. You always have a run-in phase to make sure that everything is set up for the trial to start. So that will take until the year end. It's a relatively big trial with a relatively large amount of centers. So we hope to get the recruitment started relatively quickly and hopefully also be able to report data early 2026. That's the aim we have currently communicated.
And finally, one of your major tasks is building readiness for a pivotal trial in AML. So can you go through what this building readiness means and kind of what's the significance for you as a company?
Yeah, so the steps we have taken now with CADENCE and AML have first of all delivered proof of concept in a monotherapy setting in a difficult to treat tumor. So we think that is very strong data and we need to pursue that path. That is where we now have the most concrete data that we need to focus on. The other trials will take some more time. The ovarian cancer trial still has to deliver on potential clinical effect, and Ilixadencel is re-entering the clinic. So the AML data are now the one to focus on. With the data at hand and the attractive opportunity we see in AML maintenance, we have to make sure that program is moving towards readiness for late-stage development, because it will allow us to take the program forward, but it will also allow us to have more explicit discussions with potential partners, right? But everything has to be there. Otherwise, you can't even engage in such a trial. Now, what needs to happen is we need to design a trial protocol. We need to obtain regulatory feedback. We had some initial FDA feedback early in the year, but we continue to work with both the FDA and the European authorities, the EMA. So that is part of the preparations. Very important, we need to establish large-scale manufacturing, right? Because that's required not only for the trial, but also for future commercial launch. And you want that to be the same process. So that's why the alliance with Northex is so important. We've also done a lot of market research to confirm that we are pursuing an attractive market opportunity and also how we could potentially broaden the potential of the product. So this is all part of the bigger plan to make sure that this program moves forward in the right direction. And then, of course, we need to see how it plays out with respect to what we can do ourselves, what we can do in the combination with a partner, maybe. So that's all in the game, and we can't predict exactly how things will happen. But the most important part is that we stay focused on executing on the path.
Thank you very much for the interview, Erik.
Thanks, Antti.